So here we are in the final stop of our street names tour with Zhixuan. So we're at the busy Chulia Street, and even though it seems like a really cold, really busy, bustling financial district, it's actually an area with a really meaningful history to its street name. So stick till the end of our video where we bring a special guest who will tell you what he's doing with the name Chulia Street. So Zhixuan, can you tell us a little bit more about how the name Chulia Street actually came to be?
Okay, so Chulia Street was actually named Kling Street for a long time. It was named Kling Street because of the large population of Indian immigrants in the 19th century. Yeah, so Kling, we think that Kling comes from a word Kalinga. Kalinga is actually an Indian empire in the ancient times. Okay, so the area was known to be an enclave for the Indian population, and then lining these streets, you can see a lot of the shops operated by Indian traders. Yeah. Actually, the Malay population actually referred to this street as a knife street. Yeah, because there were a lot of shops selling knives. Yeah, Jalan Pisau. So that was the name for the street. Yeah. So Kling Street actually honors this migration from India, and then it actually represents this period of history where the Indian immigrants settled here in Singapore. Yeah, but then in the early 20th century, the term Kling actually gained some negative connotations because it actually was used to refer to Indian coolies, yeah, who were of a lower class population. Yeah. So in the 1920s, the Indian Association of Singapore actually petitioned a name change for the street. So the initial suggestion was to change it to King Street.
King, like
King Street.
Okay.
But the final decision was to name it as Chulia Street because Chulia comes from Chola. Chola is also an Indian kingdom in the ancient times. So this name change still honors the population's migration history from South India.
But that's not the end of the history of Chulia Street. Today, we actually have Project Chulia Street, a non-profit organization dedicated towards improving the lives of migrant workers in Singapore and also changing the Kling mindset that some of us may have towards these individuals. And today we're very happy to have Sean, one of the co-founders of Project Chulia Street, here with us to tell us a little bit more about how his organization is rewriting the history of the name of Chulia Street. So hi Sean.
Hi.
Could you tell us a little bit more about how Project Chulia Street actually started?
Okay, we started actually in 2016. We were actually a ground-up initiative, and I have two co-founders, David and Eva, who created the company. And at that time, I was actually working in the National Volunteer Philanthropy Center, helping to start the Giving.sg, the online platform for donations and volunteering. And it was from that company that I got to meet my two bosses right now, and that's how we started.
And so why did you and your founders decide to name the organization Chulia Street?
Actually, it's quite interesting that my co-founders thought of this name, but it's actually quite interesting in the sense that, you know, in Singapore's history, we actually renamed a street just because a name of that street was kind of like a racial slur towards a different group of people. And I think that it's quite meaningful in the sense of how the government at that time chose Chulia. And the people of Chulia are people of dignity and respect. So in a sense, it's a kind of powerful meaning of our company. It's our project to bring back dignity to the migrant workers in Singapore.
I see. And so what are some examples of activities that Project Chulia Street actually does?
Yeah, we're actually focused on three main pillars right now. The first one is nutrition. The nutrition means like we want to educate migrant workers on their diet and how they can eat properly.
Yep.
So, and by eating the right foods, they can also help protect them from all the other illnesses that we as Singaporeans are so well aware of. For example, diabetes. If you eat too much sugar, drink too much Red Bull, it can cause diabetes. And the same also for rice. For example, we as Asians and our migrant workers, they love rice. So a lot of carbohydrates can lead into other illnesses as well. So in nutrition, Project Chulia Street focuses on helping to provide migrant workers with a balanced diet, educating them on how to eat properly, and at the same time in our fiestas, we will give them ice creams as a treat. So high sugar, but we'll still, you know, in a way to appreciate them and say thank you. I think one of the key things at our fiestas as well is the fact that we want Singaporeans and the community to be able to look at a migrant worker in the eyes and say thank you. So that's what we're doing. The other thing that we also do is health. So health is such an important aspect. One of our key partners is actually HealthServe, who have actually been around much longer than we. And we actually help to support the very first dental clinic for migrant workers in one of the migrant worker dormitories. The last thing that we do is in education. So I'm quite happy to see us progress from post-COVID, and hopefully we'll be able to see an online digital platform for migrant workers in e-learning.
Right. So when you talk about nutrition, because recently there was this newspaper article about how migrant workers, big companies like the catering companies are just feeding them really poorly balanced meals. So Project Chulia Street, do you actually help to cater some meals?
Okay,
or-
we don't cater meals. During Circuit Breaker was a very key time for Project Chulia Street.
Yeah.
And what we were doing was actually supplying them on a consistent basis, a weekly basis, to one of our suppliers with Milo, Nescafe 3-in-1, and cup noodles. When it came to the actual meals, that was provided by the companies. So we didn't want to interfere with that, with the other companies and how they're providing the meals to the migrant workers. But we are aware of the situation during that time of the poor quality of the food. But actually, it's quite sensitive in the sense that the numbers are there, but at the same time, the majority are actually okay with the food. So it's a challenge during that time. So, I do wish we could have provided better meals. From some stories that we heard, the migrant workers were actually okay with the food, but imagine eating the same food every single day, Monday to Friday, Monday to Sunday. So I think it was tough for the migrant workers during that time.
So how would you say COVID has impacted the activities that Project Chulia Street actually carries out?
Yeah, actually it was quite interesting. We look at when we started in 2016, we are very mass gathering based. So we always had, one of the key strengths for us is actually volunteers. We on average have over 178 volunteers who would come and help support our fiestas, which means feeding close to 5,000 to, depending on the size of the dorm, so on average about 5,000 migrant workers per fiesta. And we were doing this Labor Day, National Day, Deepavali, and International Migrant Day. So these fiestas were fun because we got the Singaporeans the ability to interact with our migrant workers. So during Circuit Breaker, we couldn't do these activities. So we were actually quite concerned for our company, how are we going to survive during Circuit Breaker? But this was our challenge, and what happened was our migrant workers were then actually spread out island-wide.
Yeah.
Terminology we use is decanted. They were decanted to other facilities, other sites. So one of our exciting projects during Circuit Breaker was actually working with HDB. So Red Hill was the very first decanted site that the migrant workers were actually moved to, and it was actually HDBs that were ready to be demolished. So basically HDB converted all these dormitories to help our migrant workers, so that because the dorm situation was too many migrant workers per dorm, so they were spread island-wide. So that's how we supported them during Circuit Breaker.
Right.
Yeah.
And so moving forward, because now we can't really do large gatherings anymore, so what does Project Chulia Street have planned?
So this year will be quite interesting. As I mentioned, e-learning is one of our key things, and we're looking at activities post-COVID. It will be quite interesting to see how we come out as a nation, but at the same time, companies like us, we want to digitize, and we see the need for digitization for our migrant workers. So one of the key things that we're trying to partner with is actually with BCA, the Building Construction Authority, and to see if we can actually convert some of their courses, because these courses are actually very meaningful and very impactful for the lives of our migrant workers. If a migrant worker was to pass one of the core trades, it means that they will have a higher certification, a better paying job, and the opportunities for them to have jobs will be higher. And our hope and our dream is that these certifications will be so meaningful globally that wherever they could work internationally, they'll be recognized. And that to us would be very meaningful.
Yeah, definitely. So how does Project Chulia Street actually reach out to the migrant workers? Do you guys have a database, or do you work with the dormitories?
We work with dormitories. That's our key partners.
Okay.
And on top of working with the dormitories, we are also working with other key partners, like, for example, HealthServe. who also have a large ability to get migrant workers as well.
I see.
There's so many great partners as well, like Raining Raincoats as an example, who have an awesome project, which is they're bringing the migrant workers now to the Singapore Flyer
Oh, wow.
as part of activities, and it's great that they get this opportunity. So I just want to share and give a shout out to them because they were able to take on that responsibility to do that. I think for us, we couldn't take that responsibility, but it gives them why I say so meaningful is because the migrant workers are somewhat in a situation like a bubble, where they can only go to the dormitory to the work and work to the dormitory. Now the government has allowed them to, if they pre-register, they can actually go to a recreational center. This to us is good because at least they have their own time away from their environment. So the Singapore Flyer is a great way to get them out of the environment as well. So I think it's really meaningful. So by these partnerships, it's been awesome because we are trying to also support them. The migrant workers who go to the Singapore Flyer will get some goodies, and hopefully Project Chulia Street can also contribute for that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely important for everyone to have work-life balance,
Yeah.
including migrant workers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what can our viewers do to help Project Chulia Street directly?
You know, it's quite interesting that you ask this because it's a situation where we can't go back to our mass gatherings. A lot of our core volunteers also were asking if we could do any activities. As of right now, we're still going to abide by the government's rules and regulations for no mass gatherings. But how volunteers can help support Project Chulia Street if they are willing to see the situation, it's being able to help us open new doors. And I think how that can happen is, for one, recognizing that there are opportunities for them to, in their own network, for example, in their own circle. I get calls all the time, you know, Sean, I have over 1,000 clothes and jackets that I want to donate, or food. So these are opportunities for us to actually network and link up so that we can create opportunities to give back to the migrant workers. So through donations, through clothing, through food, these are great opportunities for Singaporeans to give back. I think the last one would be as well, just migrant workers are such a cause. If Singaporeans really do care about that cause, I think it's also to educate their friends and to help support organizations like us. We're not the only ones, you know, and
Right.
there's so many great organizations that we can support.
So, if people want to reach out to Project Chulia Street, do they just like send you a message on Facebook or email?
Facebook has been our most active. Also on our website,
Okay.
we have a link where we will be notified, and we will then be able to communicate with our volunteers directly. I think one of the key things is looking after COVID, you know, and when the situation gets better, we will definitely inform our volunteers on what they can do.
So you actually told me that you've always been involved in the charity philanthropy sector. So personally for you, what gives you the drive to keep on going day after day in this career field of yours?
Well, I look at our mission statement. Our mission statement is that by the time every migrant worker leaves Singapore, they leave better. I think that's my answer to you. It's my how we define how they leave better is also based on an individual. I think it's all about levels sometimes. For example, if I can get one Singaporean to look at a migrant worker in their eyes and say thank you, I think to me that's great. We've impacted a life to change their mindset and mentality. But for a migrant worker, if they can leave Singapore to be able to take on new opportunities long term and provide for their families, be able to have a job and be able to earn and hold a higher pay, I think this is a dream that I have for our migrant workers. So that keeps me going.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Yes, thank you for your time. Yeah.
So that's all we have for you for a street name series. If you want to know more about what Zhu Xuan and Sean are doing, click down in the description box below. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, and we'll see you for another series of Trails and Corridors soon. See you!